Don't just stand there. You think you deserve this job. His voice thundered through the empty room. Sharp, cruel, and cold. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Not because she was scared, but because she knew silence could be power that night. Something changed the way he looked at her. It wasn't anger anymore. It was control. She thought it was just another ordinary shift. Same uniform, same faces, same quiet corners where respect was always conditional. But the way he watched her that night there was something darker behind those eyes, the kind of gaze that didn't see a person, just someone to break. And when the last customer left, he followed her into the back hallway, away from witnesses, away from safety. Before that night, her life was defined by routine. Opening the restaurant before sunrise, polishing every glass until it caught the light just right. She was good at her job, the kind of quiet excellence that went unnoticed. Customers liked her smile, managers liked her efficiency, but behind every polite thank you, there lingered an invisible reminder. People like her were still expected to prove their worth twice as hard. She'd learned to swallow insults disguised as jokes, to nod when ignored in meetings, to stay calm when promotions skipped over her name. The city outside was fast and loud, but inside those walls, silence was safer. Respect came only if you didn't demand it. Still, she kept her composure. Each night, she wrote a few notes in a small journal. Strange things she'd seen, numbers that didn't add up, whispers of money changing hands. It wasn't revenge she was collecting. It was evidence. She knew that one day someone would cross the line too far, and that line came quietly. It started with a voice behind her, the familiar manager who loved reminding her of her place. The dining hall was empty now. Tables wiped, lights dimmed, only the hum of the fridge breaking the silence. He waited until everyone had left, then took a step closer. To him, this was just another moment of control, another chance to remind her that power belonged to people who looked like him. But to her, it was the moment everything she'd endured would finally matter. The air in the restaurant shifted the moment he stepped closer. The sound of his shoes on the tile echoed louder than it should have. The lights from the hallway flickered, leaving pieces of her reflection broken in the polished steel of the counter. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His authority had always been built on quiet intimidation, the kind that told her she had no choice but to listen. He stood close enough for his words to sting, close enough to remind her that power didn't always need volume. For years, he had turned every mistake into a public spectacle, every success into his own credit. But tonight, there was no audience left. He had chosen his moment carefully, or so he thought. He spoke in the same low tone, the one that pretended to be professional but reeked of superiority. She could feel the weight of every past humiliation pressing into that single moment. Every comment about her attitude, every assumption made about her education, every whispered remark when she wasn't supposed to hear. They all came crashing together, silent, but deafening. She did not respond. Not with words. Her phone, hidden deep in her apron, had been recording since the last customer walked out. Her breathing slowed. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm. He leaned closer, trying to make her flinch. "You should be grateful," his voice seemed to say without speaking. "People like you don't get far." She took one step back, not in fear, but in calculation. Behind her, the small kitchen clock ticked toward closing time. Each second stretched longer than the last. A faint vibration buzzed against her leg, a message delivered through the encrypted app she and her husband used only for emergencies. A simple alert, ready. Her pulse steadied. The manager's words turned sharper. His face red from arrogance, not effort. He didn't notice the camera light reflected faintly on the steel countertop. He didn't notice the phone angled perfectly toward him. She'd spent months building this moment, saving evidence, mapping patterns, waiting for him to make one mistake too many. Now he was giving her everything she needed. He stepped between her and the exit, trying to trap her, to make her small again. "No one's around," he muttered, not realizing those words would later destroy him. She didn't move, didn't blink. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Then, from somewhere beyond the hallway, came the faint sound of a door opening. One door, two, heavy footsteps. Then another vibration from her phone, 2 short buzzes this time. He noticed the noise and turned, his confidence flickering just once. "Who's there?" No answer. just footsteps growing louder. The tension that once belonged to him shifted piece by piece until it wrapped around her instead. For the first time, he looked unsure. For the first time, she looked unafraid. She took a slow breath and whispered almost to herself, "Some truths can't stay hidden forever." He spun toward the entrance. The lights outside flashed against the glass. Shadows moved closer. He'd spent years controlling the narrative. Tonight, the story would finally belong to her. The door swung open with a crash that broke the silence. Two figures stepped inside, dark suits, steady movements, not a trace of hesitation. The manager froze mid-sentence, the confidence draining from his face. For a split second, the only sound was the drip of rain from his shoes. "Kevin Torres," one of the men said evenly, flashing a badge that gleamed beneath the flickering lights. "You're under investigation for fraud, workplace discrimination, and intimidation." His lips parted, but no sound came. The arrogance that once filled the room evaporated into thin air. The staff, drawn by the commotion, stood at the doorway, watching the man who once made them tremble, now unable to move. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The truth was unfolding on its own. One of the agents placed her phone on the counter, its screen glowing with hundreds of saved recordings, files, and messages. Each one a memory of silence turned into evidence. Kevin took a step back, shaking his head. "This isn't—" The words died in his throat when the agent raised a hand. For years, he'd been untouchable, protected by fear and ignorance. But fear had finally changed sides. She looked at him then, not with hatred, but with a calmness that unsettled him more than any anger could. Every insult, every quiet humiliation, every order barked across a crowded room replayed between them in that moment. Outside, thunder rolled like a closing statement. Inside, justice stood still long enough for everyone to understand what had just happened. He lowered his eyes, whispering something only he could hear. Maybe an apology. Maybe disbelief. She turned away slowly, her breath steady, her hands no longer trembling. For the first time, the room belonged to her. And for the first time, he understood what real power looked like. Quiet, patient, and undeniable. The next morning, the restaurant opened as usual, but the silence carried a different weight. Word had already spread about the recordings, the investigation, the manager who once ruled with fear now facing charges. The staff moved differently, shoulders no longer tense, voices a little louder, freer. She didn't come back for recognition. She came because closure wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space that once made her feel small. She cleaned the same counter where it all began, sunlight breaking across the surface like a quiet promise. For the first time, her reflection looked back without apology. Her phone that held months of evidence was finally powered off. But what it captured, the truth, the courage, the pain, would never really shut down. It had done its job. Outside, people walked past the restaurant unaware of the storm that had ended inside those walls. But somewhere out there, another person was living a quieter version of the same story. Another job where jokes cut too deep. Another hallway where silence was safer than speaking. Maybe that's why her story mattered. Not because it changed headlines, but because it reminded everyone watching that injustice only survives in silence. The truth doesn't always arrive with sirens or headlines. Sometimes it comes through the courage of one person deciding they've had enough. She looked out the window one last time, rain beginning to fall again, this time soft, cleansing. Some storms don't destroy, they wash the truth clean, and maybe that's the question every viewer is left with. If you saw something like this happen, would you stay silent, or would you be the one to press record? Because change doesn't start with power, it starts with proof that we all have a voice.